Hello, my dear children. A very warm welcome to today's English class. Students, I'm sure you must be waiting eagerly for today's session as we were to complete our story that we started yesterday. Yes, we were reading the story The Man with the Golden Touch. Children, let's have a quick recap of the story and after that we will move ahead and see what happened next in our story. So the story started with King Midas, who was a very kind king. And where did he rule? Yes, he ruled over a kingdom in Greece. He was a very rich king, but he was very greedy at the same time. And do you remember what was his greatest wish? Yes, his greatest wish was to become the richest man in the world. And day and night he kept on thinking about how he can become the richest man in the world. Now one day, as he was just walking in his garden, he saw an old man who was taking rest in his garden among the flowers. So he was a king. He could have said anything to that man because entering a king's garden is something that is not allowed. Anybody and everybody does not get permission to enter the king's garden. But then, because our King Midas, he was very kind, he felt pity on that aged old man and he let him go without giving him any punishment. Now, do you know, children, who was that old man in reality? Yes, he was the forest god. Now, the forest god was very happy with this kind gesture of King Midas. He gave a wish to King Midas. He told him that he can ask for anything he desired. Desired means whatever he wished, he can ask from the forest god and the forest god will fulfill his wish. Now hearing this, King Midas became very happy and excited. Yes, anybody would become excited when somebody tells you that I'll fulfill your wish, whatever you wish, whatever you ask for, I'll give you. Anybody would get excited. And so was King Midas. Now we all know that King Midas had the dream of becoming the richest man in the world. So he thought that what if whatever I touch turns into gold, then nobody can stop me from becoming the richest person in the world. Yes, he was right in thinking so. Because gold is a very precious and a very costly metal. So, he asked the forest god to grant him that whatever he touched should turn into gold. Now, forest god, as he had promised, so he kept his promise and he told the king that starting tomorrow morning, that starting from the morning of the next day, whatever he is going to touch is going to turn into gold. Now this king, he could not contain his joy. He could not just stop himself from expressing his pleasure. He was very, very happy. And he was just waiting for the next day to come and touch everything to turn into gold. So, what happened the next day? Was he happy on everything turning into gold? Or what did he was heading towards some problem? Let's read further to know that. So, the next day, as the sun rose, he went around his palace and turned everything that he could into gold. What happened then? The beautiful flowers in his garden that turned towards the sun for light stood rigid as King Midas approached and touched them. After a while, he sat down for breakfast, but as soon as he touched the fruit, the cake, the glass of water, everything turned into gold. The king had the most lavish feast laid out before him, but he could not eat a bite of it. Yes, the beautiful flowers in his garden that turned towards light, towards sun for light, stood rigid as King Midas approached and touched them. So, the flowers, the beautiful flowers that were there in his garden, they turned towards the sun for light. They stood rigid. Rigid means hard, stiff, something that is inflexible and unable to bend. So they stood rigid as King Midas approached them. Approached means he came near to them. He came nearer and he touched them. As King Midas touched the flowers, they stood rigid, hard, and inflexible. So that was very strange because the flowers also they turned into gold, and gold, as we know, is you cannot move them. The beauty of the flowers that just came to an end. After a while, he sat down for breakfast, but as soon as he touched the fruit, the cake, the glass of water, everything turned into gold. Yes, he being a human being, he had to eat something. So after a while, that means after some time, as he sat down for eating his breakfast, as soon as whatever he touched, whatever was there in breakfast for him, the fruit, the cake, and even the glass of water, everything that he touched, it turned into gold. The king had the most lavish feast laid out before him, but he could not eat a bite of it. So he had the most lavish. Lavish means very rich. Lavish feast means very special food. Yes, of course, he was a king. He must have got the best of the foods, the best of the breakfast in front of him. He had the best of food in front of him, but he could not eat a bite of it. Of course, how could he eat? Because it had turned into gold. Can somebody eat anything made of gold? No, that's not possible. Yes, very clearly we can see in this picture that he had the best food in front of him. Apples, bananas, and cake and what not. But whatever he touched, it turned into gold. And we can just have a look at his face and just guess what he would be feeling when he was not even able to take a bite of his breakfast. Next, he was getting extremely hungry, but he could not drink and eat gold. Just then, his beautiful daughter came running to greet him and he hugged her. Lo and behold, his lovely daughter, at his touch, turned hard and fast into a gold statue. All her smiles had frozen into gold. Oh my God, what a pity what had happened. He was getting extremely hungry but could not drink and eat gold. Extremely hungry means very hungry. Hungry means when you need food. So extremely means very much. So he really needed food at that time. But that was not possible because he could not eat and drink gold. Just then his beautiful daughter came running to greet him and he hugged her. Yes, just then, as it was morning time, his beautiful daughter, she came running to greet him. Greet means, children, a sign of welcome when you meet someone. When you meet someone and wish him or her, that is called greeting. And he hugged her. Hug means the act of, holding someone tightly in arms is called hugging, cuddling or embracing. So he held her in her arms. So, yes, that is a very common gesture of a father. In the morning, when you also might be meeting your parents, you wish them and your parents hug them. So, like a normal father, he hugged her daughter. Lo and behold. Yes, lo and behold. Children, this is an expression that is used to express wonder and surprise. It means look and see. Look and see what happened. His lovely daughter at his touch turned hard and fast into a gold statue. Yes, he had not even thought of that when he touched his daughter, even she turned into a gold statue. Statue, you understand? Any sculpture, an object that is made of a hard material is called a statue. So, she also turned into a statue made of gold. All her smiles had frozen into gold. Yes, the smiles, the happiness that was on her face, the beautiful daughter, it had frozen into gold. She had become motionless and she had turned all gold. What a pity. The king bowed his head and started crying. He was perhaps the richest man, but in reality, he was worse than the poorest person. He could not eat his food, and now his only child had turned into a statue. There were no smiles left in his golden world. Yeah, that is what happened. The king bowed his head. To bow your head means to bend your head as a sign of maybe respect or maybe shame also. Bow means to bend your head down. So he bowed his head and started crying. So he started crying. Yes, he was extremely sad. He was perhaps the richest man, but in reality was worse than the poorest person. That is so true. He was perhaps means maybe, possibly he was the richest man. Maybe he had the most of money. He had a lot of money. But in reality means in actual, he was worse. Worse means even bad than the poorest person. His situation here, worse means his situation was bad than the poorest person. Poorest means one who was not having any money. His situation was bad, worse than that person also, though he had a lot of money. Why? Because he could not eat his food. He could not eat his food. He could not eat even a bite of food. And now his only child had turned into a statue. He had only one daughter, and even she had turned into a statue because of his greed. There were no smiles left in his golden world. Yes, his world was all golden at this time, but there were no smiles. Nobody was happy. So there were no smiles left in his golden world. Next, seeing his tears, the forest god reappeared and asked him if he was happy with his golden touch. The king shook his head sadly and said that he was the most miserable man. Yes, now he had realized his mistake. Seeing his tears, yes, because he had started crying. So, on seeing his tears, the forest god, yes, it was the forest god who had granted him the wish. The forest god reappeared. Reappeared means to appear again. Earlier he had appeared, so now he had appeared again and asked him if he was happy with his golden touch. Now, because he was crying after he had been granted his wish, but because he was crying, so the forest god appeared again and he asked if he was happy with the golden touch. The king shook his head sadly and said that he was the most miserable man. The king shook his head. Shook means to move up and down. Or maybe sideways. So he shook his head sadly. Of course, he was sad. So he shook his head sadly and said that he was the most miserable man. Miserable means unhappy, most depressed, sad, or you may say sorrowful. So he was the most depressed, most unhappy man. And he told it to the forest god. Yes, in this picture we can clearly see King Midas folding his hands and the forest god. And King Midas, he must be telling that how his golden touch had made him the saddest person on the earth. The king cried and asked for forgiveness. He said, "I will give up all my gold. Please give me my daughter back, because without her, I have lost everything worth having." Yes, children are the most precious things that a parent might have. So the king cried and he asked for forgiveness. Forgiveness means when you ask sorry from somebody for doing something wrong. So he asked for forgiveness from the forest god. What did he say? He said, "I'll give up all my gold." I'll give up means, yes, I'll give away all my gold. I don't want all that gold. Please give my daughter back, because without her, I have lost everything worth having. He said, "I just want my daughter back. Please give my daughter back to me, because without my daughter, nothing in this world seems important to me. Everything is meaningless, and I feel that I have lost everything when I don't have my daughter with me." So that means he had realized his mistake. Finally, the forest god smiled and said, "You have become wiser than before." The king begged the god to take away his wretched gift. The forest god took pity on the king and told him that his touch could be removed by bathing in the holy magical river that flowed through the nearby hills. King Midas quickly went and took a dip in the river, and the spell was reversed. So on hearing his request, the forest god, he smiled, and what did he say? He said, "You have become wiser than before." That means you have become more intelligent, more sensible than you were earlier. The king begged the god. Begged means to ask someone humbly for something. So he begged in front of him to take away his wretched gift. Wretched means, children, of something that is bad and of poor quality. So he did not want his bad gift to be with him anymore. The forest god took pity on the king and told him that his touch could be removed by bathing in the holy magical river that flowed through the nearby hills. So he told him that Yes, his touch could be removed, could be taken away by bathing, by taking a bath in the holy. Holy means something that is sacred, something that is dedicated to God or for a religious purpose. In the holy magical river. Magical means something that has magical powers. So that river was magical and it flowed through the nearby hills. King Midas quickly went and took a dip in the river and the spell was reversed. So King Midas quickly means without wasting a moment, he quickly went and took a dip in the river and the spell means the magical power. It was reversed. It was taken back. Yes, we can clearly see King Midas taking a dip in the holy river to reverse the magical power that he had got from forest god. He rushed back to his palace and hugged his daughter. The king learned a lesson which he never forgot for the rest of his life. Okay, after taking a dip in the holy river, he rushed back to his palace. He quickly went back to his palace and hugged his daughter. The king learned a lesson. To learn a lesson means, yes, when you suffer a bad experience and know that, yes, this job, I don't have to do it again. So he had learned a lesson which he never forgot for the rest of his life. Yes, how could he forget this important lesson that he had learned? So, high five, or the moral of the story is, there is enough for a person's need, but never for his greed. Yes, what does this mean? It means that there is enough. Enough means sufficient. Enough means as much as is required. So there is enough for a person's need. Whatever we require, we can get enough of it, but it is never enough for his greed. Greed means when you have selfish desires to get more and more of something, greed can never be fulfilled. But yes, our needs can always be fulfilled. So that is the lesson that we have learned from this story. Now let us discuss some question answers so that we know that and we are sure that we have understood the story well. The first question is, even though the king was quite rich, why did he wish for more gold? Yes, why did the king wish for more gold? Yes, we all know that he was a king and he was quite rich. Then why did he wish for more gold? Yes, the king wished for more gold because he was very greedy and he wanted to become the richest person in the world. Next one. What happened when the king sat down for breakfast? Yes, this is something that we can never forget. When he sat down for breakfast, he could not take even a bite of it, even though a lavish feast was laid in front of him, but because everything had turned into gold, so he could not take a bite of his breakfast. Next, what made the king realize his mistake? Yes, what was that one incident that made him realize his mistake? He was continuously turning things into gold. But what was the incident that made him realize his mistake? Very good. The turning of his own daughter into a gold statue made the king realize his mistake. Yes, when his own daughter turned into a gold statue, he finally realized his mistake. Yes, children, with that we come to the end of this story and I hope you have enjoyed the story. I enjoyed it a lot. Reading stories that is such a good habit and it tells us so many moral values also that we know, but at times we forget in our lives. So keep reading more stories, right? That's all for today, my dear children. Happy learning. Bye bye.